little one. Join us!
Welcome to our channel, where we delve deep into the hidden truths of Japan's ancient and terrifying folklore. In this video, we are going to explore a legend that blurs the line between the monstrous and the divine, a creature whose very existence is a herald of doom. If you find these explorations into the unknown intriguing, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, so you never miss a descent into the world of the supernatural. The sound of falling rain was the only thing that echoed through the drafty, shadow-filled interior of an old farmhouse, barn on a night that would forever be etched into the local memory. Outside, the downpour turned the earth into a thick, cloying mud, and the rhythmic drumming of water against the thatched roof created a heavy, oppressive atmosphere that seemed to isolate the small structure from the rest of the world. It was late into the midnight hours, a time when the boundary between our reality and the unseen world is said to grow thin and permeable. Inside, a farmer stood hunched over in the dim, flickering light of a single lantern, his breath visible in the cold, damp air, as he assisted one of his cows through a difficult labor. The scent of wet straw, old wood, and the iron-rich aroma of blood hung heavy in the barn, making the air feel thick and difficult to breathe. As the calf was finally delivered, the farmer reached out with trembling hands to clear the birth membranes, expecting to find the familiar, blunt snout of a newborn animal. Instead, he found himself staring into a face that defied every law of nature and sanity. The body of the creature was unmistakably that of a calf, covered in slick, wet fur and shivering from the sudden chill of the world outside the womb. But where the head of a beast should have been, there sat the head of a human man, his features twisted into an expression of profound, agonizing suffering. The skin of the face was pale and wrinkled, as if it had aged decades within the span of a single pregnancy, and its eyes were not the vacant, wide-set eyes of a herbivore, but the piercing, intelligent eyes of a person who had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. There was no sound of a typical newborn's bleat or cry. Instead, this monstrous hybrid remained eerily silent, its chest heaving with shallow, wet breaths as it lay in the blood-stained straw. The creature, dripping with amniotic fluid that glistened like oil, under the lantern's weak glow, turned its head with a slow, deliberate grace and fixed its gaze directly onto the farmer. In those eyes, the man saw not a mindless animal, but a bottomless well of intellect, and a terrifying foresight that seemed to encompass every tragedy yet to come. This was the birth of a Kudan, a prophetic beast that has been both feared and worshipped across Japan for centuries. Legend tells us that a Kudan is born only during times of great upheaval or impending catastrophe. It lives for only a few days, sometimes only a few hours, but within that brief span of existence, it possesses the ability to speak the human tongue with chilling clarity. Its purpose is singular and absolute: to deliver a prophecy regarding a major disaster, a war or a famine that will soon befall the land. Once the prophecy is uttered, the Kudan's energy spent, it draws its final breath and perishes, leaving behind a world irrevocably changed by its words. The prophecies of the Kudan are said to be infallible, carrying a weight of truth that no human witness can deny. This sense of dread, of a future already written in the stars and spoken by a monster, has allowed the legend of the Kudan to take deep root in the collective psyche of the Japanese people, lingering even into the modern age. If you were to stand in that barn feeling the damp cold, seep into your bones and hearing a beast speak your future in the voice of an old man, would you have the strength to believe it? Or would you pray for it to be a hallucination born of exhaustion? As we move from the isolated barns of the countryside to the bustling streets of the late Edo and early Meiji periods, we see how the Kudan transitioned from a local omen into a national phenomenon. During this era of rapid social change and political instability, information was a precious commodity, and the appearance of a Kudan was considered the most vital news imaginable. It was not viewed as a mere ghost story, or a piece of entertainment to pass the time for the people of the 19th century. A Kudan's birth was a matter of state importance that could signal the end of a dynasty or the beginning of a national tragedy. When rumors of a Kudan birth reached a city, the local publishers would scramble to produce what were known as kawaraban, or woodblock printed broadsheets. These early newspapers featured crude, but haunting illustrations of the creature a man's face grafted onto a bull's neck and detailed accounts of its final words. These prints were sold on street corners by criers, who shouted the grim details to crowds of anxious citizens, who clutched the thin paper as if it were a talisman against the very darkness it described. The records of the Tenpo era, particularly during the Great Tenpo Famine, provide a harrowing look at how the Kudan functioned as a psychological anchor for a desperate population. In one documented instance, a village ravaged by crop failure and disease reported the birth of a human-faced calf. As the villagers gathered around the dying creature, it spoke in a voice that was described as both hollow and commanding. It told them that the rains would not return for 3 more seasons, and that the earth would remain as hard as iron, yielding no grain for the hungry. The air in the village, already heavy with the scent of wood smoke and decay, seemed to grow even colder as the prophecy was delivered. However, the Kudan offered a strange ritualistic hope. It claimed that those who drew its image and pasted it upon their front doors would be spared from the worst of the coming pestilence. This specific detail highlights a fascinating transition in the folklore. The monster became the medicine. People, driven by a primal fear for their lives, and the lives of their children, spent their last coins to buy these prints. The act of pinning the image of the monster to their homes was a way of acknowledging the grim reality of their fate, while simultaneously pleading for a reprieve. This behavior draws a striking parallel to the Amabi, the supernatural, mermaid-like creature that saw a massive resurgence during the recent global pandemic. Both creatures are heralds of disease, who provide a visual remedy to the very suffering they predict. However, while the Amabi is often depicted with a certain charm or colorful mystery, the Kudan is characterized by a heavy, suffocating atmosphere of inevitable doom. Its predictions are not suggestions, they are cold, hard facts of a universe that does not care for human suffering. For the people of the Edo period, buying a kawaraban of a Kudan was perhaps less about finding hope and more about finding a way to prepare their souls for the inevitable. It was a confrontation with the divine or the demonic, a moment where the veil was pulled back, to show the gears of a world that was winding down toward catastrophe. The shadow of this creature, appearing at every major turning point in Japanese history, served as a constant reminder that human agency is often dwarfed by the movements of a much larger and more terrifying destiny. The reach of the Kudan did not end with the modernization of Japan, rather. It found new and more terrifying ways to manifest during the tumultuous years of the Showa era, particularly during the darkest days of the Second World War. As the tide of the war turned, and the skies over Japan's major cities began to fill with the roar of enemy bombers, the legend of the Kudan returned with a renewed and sinister energy. In the city of Kobe and its surrounding mountainous districts, a series of sightings began to circulate through the whispers of the population, spreading like a wildfire fueled by fear and desperation. People spoke of a human-faced calf born in a secluded dairy farm, its eyes filled with a mournful light as it gazed upon the burning horizon. This particular Kudan was said to have issued a prophecy that was unthinkable at the time. It stated quite clearly that Japan would lose the war, and that shortly after the surrender, a rain of fire would fall from the heavens that would dwarf everything the people had suffered thus far. In the hyper-militarized society of wartime Japan, speaking of defeat was considered a supreme act of treason, punishable by imprisonment or worse by the Kamaitachi, the dreaded military police. Yet because these warnings were framed as the supernatural prophecies of the Kudan, the rumors bypassed the usual channels of censorship and took hold in the collective unconscious. The authorities were deeply disturbed by the speed and intensity with which these stories spread. They launched frantic investigations to find the source of the defeatist rumors, scouring the countryside for the farm where the creature was supposedly born. They interrogated farmers, searched stables, and monitored the conversations in marketplaces, but they could never find the patient zero of the legend. It was as if the story itself was being breathed out by the very land, a manifestation of the suppressed terror of a people who knew the end was near, but were forbidden from saying so. The locations where these sightings occurred were almost always places where the sense of claustrophobia and hopelessness was at its peak. In the cramped air raid shelters and the soot-covered streets of Kobe, the voice of the Kudan was a dark mirror of the public's inner voice. Was the prophecy a cruel mockery of their plight, or was it a form of mercy? By telling them that the war would end in defeat, the Kudan was offering a terminal point to their suffering, a light at the end of a long, bloody tunnel, even if that light was the flash of an atomic blast. Historical records from that time often mention a peculiar change in the demeanor of those who heard or believed the prophecy. They did not fall into a state of panic instead. They adopted a strange, quiet resolve, a dignified resignation to a fate that was now certain. In the face of a future that has already been declared by a messenger from the beyond, the struggle of the present moment takes on a different, perhaps more bearable quality. The Kudan, in its monstrous wisdom, provided the one thing the government could not, an ending to the story. Before we continue our journey into the linguistic and scientific mysteries of this creature, I want to take a moment to engage with you directly. Imagine for a moment that you are walking through a quiet, dimly lit rural path tonight, and you encounter a creature that speaks with a human voice, claiming to be a messenger of the future. If this being offered to tell you just one thing about what lies ahead, would you want to know? Would you ask about the global shifts in our world, such as a major natural disaster or the fate of our civilization? Or would you ask something deeply personal, like the date of your own passing or the future happiness of your children? The choice to know the future is a heavy one, carrying the potential to either set you free or imprison you in a countdown. Please share your thoughts and what you would ask in the comments below. I am truly curious to see how you would handle such a confrontation with the inevitable. Beyond the realm of ghost stories and wartime rumors, the Kudan has left an indelible mark on the Japanese language itself, a testament to how deeply this folklore is woven into the fabric of daily life. Have you ever encountered the phrase Kudan no gotoshi? While it may sound like a dusty, archaic expression to some, it remains a pillar of traditional Japanese legal and formal communication. In the context of old contracts, deeds, and official proclamations, this phrase, which translates to as the Kudan, was used at the end of a document to signify that the contents were as absolute and unchanging as the prophecy of a Kudan. It was a linguistic seal of authenticity, a way of stating that the promises made in the text were devoid of any lies or hidden agendas. To use the name of a monster to guarantee the truth of a legal document is a phenomenon that is incredibly rare on the global stage, highlighting just how much authority was granted to the words of this supernatural being. The choice of the cow as the host for this human face is also a detail of profound significance in Japanese cultural history. For centuries, the cow was the most essential companion to the Japanese farmer, a dedicated and hard-working beast of burden that tilled the soil and helped sustain the village. It was a creature associated with humility, sacrifice, and a silent, stoic endurance. To have an eldritch, human-faced horror emerge from such a familiar and benevolent source created a powerful psychological dissonance. It tapped into a primal fear that the most stable parts of our lives could, at any moment, give birth to the irrational and the terrifying. Yet the Japanese people saw a kind of purity in this. They believed that while humans are inherently flawed and prone to deception for the sake of profit or ego, the animal kingdom and the monsters that spring from it cannot lie. A beast that speaks does so because the truth is so heavy it can no longer be contained within the silent world of nature. The use of Kudan no gotoshi in official documents served as a constant reminder that the truth is a sacred and often frightening thing. When a merchant or a lord signed a paper with that phrase, they were essentially invoking the power of the prophetic beast to witness their oath. They were saying that if they were to break their word, they would be defying the very laws of fate that the Kudan represents. Even today, as we move through a world of digital contracts and encrypted signatures, the ghost of the Kudan lingers in the formal registers of the language. It suggests that deep in the Japanese psyche, there remains a belief that the ultimate truth doesn't come from the logic of men, but from a source that is older, stranger, and far more uncompromising. The sharp, knowing gaze of the Kudan, as depicted in old woodblock prints, seems to follow the pen of every person who attempts to commit their will to paper, watching to ensure that the words remain true to the reality they create. If we attempt to analyze the Kudan through the lens of modern science, we find ourselves at the intersection of biology, neurology, and the psychology of the masses. From a purely biological standpoint, cases of animals being born with severe craniofacial deformities are well documented. Genetic mutations or environmental toxins can cause a calf's facial structure to collapse, or rearrange in ways that, to a stressed human observer, might resemble a human countenance. This is often explained by the psychological phenomenon of pareidolia, where the human brain, which is hardwired to recognize faces as a survival mechanism, sees a man in the moon or a face on Mars in random patterns. In the low light of a barn, amid the trauma of a difficult animal birth, it is easy to see how a farmer's mind might project a human face onto a deformed calf, creating a monster out of a biological tragedy. However, what science struggles to explain is the consistent report of articulate, complex, and grammatically correct speech coming from these creatures. A calf, even one with a human-like face, does not possess the vocal cord structure, the respiratory control, or the neural pathways required for human language. Yet the historical records are remarkably consistent in describing not just a noise, but a low, resonant male voice that conveys specific, data-heavy information. These are not the babbles of a confused mind, they are organized prophecies involving dates, directions, and casualties. How does a hallucination become so standardized across different provinces and centuries? Some researchers suggest that the speech might be a form of auditory pareidolia, where the brain interprets the wet, guttural sounds of a dying animal's breath as words, shaped by the listener's own deep-seated anxieties and expectations. But there is a more disturbing possibility that modern science has yet to fully map. Is it possible that the Kudan represents a kind of glitch in the system of reality? In the same way that a computer program might produce a strange, unintended output when the code is under too much stress, perhaps the fabric of our world produces these anomalies during times of extreme collective trauma. The Kudan could be seen as a temporary leak of information from a future that has already been calculated by the underlying laws of the universe. The biological mutation is simply the physical vessel required for this information to manifest in our three-dimensional space. The fact that the creature dies almost immediately after speaking suggests that the physical world cannot sustain such a high-density burst of illegal information for long. It is as if the universe recognizes the error and deletes the file as soon as the message is delivered. The human face on the bovine body becomes a literal interface, a way for the cold, alien logic of destiny to communicate with the emotional, panicked world of humans. In the contemporary era, the legend of the Kudan hasn't vanished. It has simply evolved into a digital urban legend, haunting the corners of the internet. One of the most persistent modern variations is the story of the Ushi-onna, or the cow woman. According to reports that circulated widely on Japanese internet forums like 2channel and through early social media, sightings of a woman with a cow's head, or a cow with a woman's face, spiked just before the 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake. These modern encounters didn't take place in barns, but in the sterile, concrete environment of underground shopping malls or in the quiet, affluent residential areas of the Kobe Hills at night. The cow woman is said to appear suddenly in the shadows, her presence heralded by a heavy metallic smell and the sound of dragging hooves. Unlike the Kudan of the past, who was often viewed with a degree of religious awe, the modern cow woman is a figure of pure, visceral terror. She represents a breakdown of the urban order, a nightmare that invades the safety of our technological world. If you encounter her, it is said that you will either experience a personal tragedy or become a witness to a disaster that will kill thousands. The transition from the prophetic beast to the cursed woman reflects a change in how we perceive our relationship with fate. In the past, prophecy was a communal event, something the whole village would prepare for. Today, the encounter is isolated and personal, reflecting the loneliness and fragmentation of modern life. The fear is no longer about the survival of the tribe, but about the random, senseless violence of a world where disasters strike without warning and without meaning. The persistence of these stories suggests that even as we surround ourselves with the light of our screens and the certainty of our algorithms, we still feel the presence of the unknown crouching in the darkness. We have replaced the criers of the Edo period with the trending hashtags of today, but the underlying psychological need remains the same. We want to believe that there is a pattern to the chaos, even if that pattern is a terrifying one. The cow woman is the modern ghost of the Kudan, a reminder that the earth beneath our feet is ancient and remembers the blood that was spilled long before the concrete was poured. She is a symbol of our unresolved anxieties about the future, a manifestation of the unpredictable in a world that prides itself on prediction. Physical evidence of the Kudan, or at least what is claimed to be evidence, can still be found in various museums and private temples throughout Japan. These Kudan mummies are grotesque objects, usually consisting of a small taxidermied calf body with a dried, shriveled human head attached. To look upon one of these artifacts is a chilling experience. The leathery skin and the sunken sockets of the eyes carry a weight of history that is hard to dismiss as a simple prank. In many cases, these mummies were used as central attractions in traveling freak shows or misamono during the Meiji era, where people would pay a few coins to see the miracle beast that had predicted the fall of the shogunate. Scientific analysis of these mummies often reveals the handiwork of incredibly skilled craftsmen. Using a combination of animal bones, plaster, and human hair, these artisans created fakes that were so convincing they could withstand close inspection by a superstitious public. However, to call them fake is to miss the point of their existence. These objects were created because people wanted to believe in the Kudan. They were physical anchors for a mythology that gave meaning to their lives. Even if the mummy in the glass case is a construction of wood and hide, the fear it inspired and the prayers offered to it were entirely real. The artifact is a vessel for the collective belief of a nation. The aura of these mummies continues to fascinate and repel visitors to this day. There is something about the thingness of the Kudan mummy that defies the logic of the laboratory. When you stand in the quiet hall of a temple looking at a creature that should not exist, you aren't thinking about the craftsmanship of a Meiji-era artist. You are thinking about the possibility that somewhere, in the dark corners of the world, nature really did produce such a horror. The mummy serves as a bridge between the world of stories and the world of physical reality. It is a reminder that our ancestors didn't just tell tales. They lived in a world where the boundary between the real and the impossible was constantly being crossed. As we reach the end of this exploration into the shadows of Japanese history, there is one final, chilling detail that often gets overlooked in the standard accounts of the Kudan. Some ancient texts suggest that the Kudan doesn't just predict the deaths of others in its final moments. It is said to predict its own disappearance from the human heart. There is a prophecy attributed to a Kudan born in a remote mountain village centuries ago, which claimed that its true power would only be revealed when it was finally forgotten. When I am no longer feared, and when my name is but a footnote in a book of fables, that is when the greatest of all calamities shall arrive, the creature supposedly whispered before it died. This suggests that the legend of the Kudan acts as a sort of spiritual early warning system for the culture. By keeping the memory of the monster alive, we stay attuned to the fragility of our existence and the reality of change. When we become too comfortable, too reliant on our own technological mastery, we lose the ability to read the signs of the coming storm. The Kudan, in its repulsive and frightening form, forces us to look at the things we would rather ignore. It is a mirror held up to the darker parts of our nature and the uncertain parts of our future. Perhaps the real danger isn't the monster itself, but the silence that follows when we stop listening for its voice. Next time you are alone at night and you hear a sound that doesn't quite fit the environment, the rustle of straw where there is no barn, or a voice that sounds too old for the body that carries it, do not be so quick to dismiss it. It might just be the world trying to tell you something that you aren't ready to hear. If you've stayed with me this far, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into one of Japan's most unsettling legends. If you have any of your own stories about premonitions or strange encounters, please leave them in the comments. We love reading your experiences. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can join us for our next journey into the unknown. Until then, keep your eyes open and your heart guarded. We will see you in the next haunting.
You are lost, little one. Join us.
The Ittan-momen is known as one of the most iconic traditional Japanese yokai, but when you envision its form, what kind of imagery truly manifests in the depths of your mind? For many, the first image that appears is likely the charming, somewhat comical character from the works of the legendary Shigeru Mizuki, a friendly sheet of cloth flying through the air to aid his companions. However, the original form preserved in ancient folklore is far removed from such approachable, endearing depictions. If we peel back the layers of modern adaptation and look into the raw historical accounts, we find a creature that is devoid of warmth or whimsy, possessing instead a cold, mechanical, and predatory intent that chills the very soul. This entity, which has been spoken of since ancient times, primarily in the Osumi region of Kagoshima Prefecture, is characterized by a terrifyingly aggressive nature, acting as a silent airborne executioner that wraps itself around the necks of unsuspecting travelers to induce a slow and agonizing suffocation. Imagine a moonlit path where the air is thick with humidity, and the only sound is the rhythmic crunch of your own footsteps on the gravel. Suddenly, a streak of pure, brilliant white cuts through the darkness, moving with a fluid grace that defies the laws of physics. It does not flutter like a piece of laundry caught in a breeze. It swims through the atmosphere with the calculated precision of a shark in deep water. This entity, an inanimate object seemingly granted, a malevolent consciousness descends from the canopy with a singular purpose to hunt. The descriptions of this phenomenon, involving a silent, featureless white object performing impossible aerial maneuvers, show a chilling and undeniable correlation with modern accounts of unidentified flying objects or UFOs. Today, we will embark on an exhaustive exploration of the terror surrounding the Ittan-momen, peeling back the folklore to examine the entity through the lens of modern science, high-tech military hypothesis, and the startling possibility of extraterrestrial intervention. Is the Ittan-momen merely a phantom born of cloth and superstition? Or is it a remnant of an advanced, misunderstood technology that has been observing humanity for centuries? The birthplace of the Ittan-momen is said to be the town of Takayama, in the Kimotsuki district of Kagoshima Prefecture, a land where the mountains meet the sea and the shadows seem to linger longer than elsewhere. In this specific geographical pocket, accounts of white, cloth-like objects soaring through the twilight sky have been recorded for generations. The name itself reflects its physical dimensions, as an ittan is a traditional unit of measurement for fabric, roughly 10 meters in length and 30 centimeters in width. In the context of the Edo period, this was a standard size for a roll of cotton, yet the question remains as to why a utilitarian object would ever need to take flight. When we analyze the oral traditions and local manuscripts of the region, it becomes clear that this object was never merely floating or drifting. It moved with a discernible sentient will. Witnesses from centuries ago described seeing a long, pale streak weaving through the dense branches of ancient forests, moving at speeds that no bird could match. They spoke of the psychological dread that preceded its appearance, a sudden drop in temperature, and a crushing sense of being watched by something that lacked eyes. One account tells of a man walking home at dusk when he felt a sudden, icy draft against the nape of his neck, followed by the sensation of a cold, smooth surface grazing his skin. When he turned, there was nothing but the vanishing silhouette of a white ribbon disappearing into the clouds. For the people of Osumi, the Ittan-momen was not a story told to entertain children. It was a physical threat that dictated where one could walk after the sun had dipped below the horizon. Why did these specific, highly detailed sightings cluster so densely in this particular region? Think for a moment about why a specific entity would be tied so inextricably to a single location. Could it be the unique atmospheric conditions, the specific magnetic signature of the Kyushu Mountains, or perhaps a cultural memory of a singular traumatic event that occurred in the distant past? I would be very interested to hear your theories on why certain yokai seem to claim specific territories. Please share your thoughts and hypotheses in the comments section below. Now, let us turn our attention to the physical characteristics and the baffling flight mechanics of the Ittan-momen from a more technical perspective. One of the most consistent details in historical sightings is that the object does not rely on the wind to move, even on nights where the air was completely stagnant. Where not a single leaf on a willow tree would stir, the Ittan-momen was observed, propelling itself through the sky as if it were navigating through water. From the standpoint of modern aerodynamics, this is an impossibility for a simple piece of fabric. A cloth has no rigid structure to maintain an airfoil shape, and it certainly possesses no visible means of propulsion such as wings or engines. Yet it moves with purpose and high velocity. If we apply the cutting-edge theories of contemporary physics, we are forced to consider the possibility of a propulsion system that does not rely on lift, but perhaps on the manipulation of gravity or the creation of a localized vacuum. The dimensions of the Ittan-momen, being 10 meters long and 30 centimeters wide, are actually quite efficient for a certain type of hypothetical flight. A thin, elongated, and flat geometry allows for a massive surface area relative to its thickness, which could facilitate rapid changes in direction through undulation, much like the movement of a ribbon eel in the ocean. This design would minimize drag while maximizing the potential for sudden, erratic maneuvers that would baffle any pursuer. Furthermore, some accounts mention that the Ittan-momen emitted a faint, ethereal glow, or possessed a degree of transparency, that allowed the stars to be seen through its body. This suggests that we are not dealing with organic fibers like cotton, but perhaps a state of matter such as cold plasma, or a highly advanced energy field that has taken on a semi-solid form. If people living in the 17th or 18th centuries were to witness a low-altitude, reconnaissance drone equipped with active optical camouflage or a shimmering energy-based entity, they would lack the scientific vocabulary to describe it. They would look for the closest possible analog in their daily lives. A long, thin, white object moving through the air would naturally be described as a roll of cotton. This linguistic bridge allowed them to categorize the uncategorizable, turning a potential encounter with advanced technology into a manageable piece of folklore. They were defining a phenomenon that defied their understanding, using the only tools they had: their own eyes and their most common materials. This leads us to a fascinating comparison with modern reports of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, from around the globe. In recent years, the declassification of military footage by the United States Department of Defense has brought to light objects that exhibit flight characteristics, strikingly similar to those of the Ittan-momen. There are accounts of what investigators call flying humanoids or ribbon-shaped UFOs, long, flexible entities that move at hypersonic speeds without generating a sonic boom or visible exhaust. The behavior of the Ittan-momen, specifically its tendency to wrap around the necks of humans, takes on a sinister new meaning in this context. Rather than a simple act of ghostly malice, this could be interpreted as a programmed tactical maneuver. From a drone-centric perspective, the act of constriction could be a method of immobilization for the purpose of biological sampling or the neutralization of a potential threat to the craft's mission. If an autonomous scout from a non-human intelligence were tasked with gathering data on local inhabitants, an encounter with a human would necessitate a quick, silent way to subdue the subject. To an observer in the Edo period, a sleek, white, automated capture device would look exactly like a haunted piece of cloth seeking to strangle its prey. When we view these legends through this lens, the folklore of Japan ceases to be mere fiction and begins to look like a historical archive of extraterrestrial or high-tech activity on Earth, recorded by witnesses who did not yet know the words for robotics or interstellar travel. We must also address the visceral aggression and the biological anomalies associated with the Ittan-momen. Traditional accounts state that once the cloth covers a person's face, it will not let go until the victim has ceased to breathe. This is a highly efficient strategic method of killing that requires a certain level of tactile feedback and awareness. If this were a simple autonomous weapon, it would be designed for stealth and lethality, approaching its target without a sound, and neutralizing them with minimal energy expenditure. Even more disturbing are the tales of those who attempted to defend themselves. There are stories of samurai, who managed to strike the Ittan-momen with their katanas. In some versions, the blade passes through the cloth, as if it were cutting through flesh, and to the horror of the onlookers, actual red blood begins to spray from the wound. In other versions, the blade is deflected with a metallic ring, as if the cloth were made of reinforced steel. These contradictory reports point toward a material that is far more complex than cotton. We might be looking at a description of a programmable matter or a biometallic, alloy a substance that can remain flexible and soft one moment, then transition to a hardened, defensive state the next. The sight of a piece of fabric bleeding is an image of profound ontological horror, blurring the line between the organic and the inorganic. It suggests a level of bioengineering that even today we are only beginning to conceptualize. Have you ever experienced a sensation of pure existential dread when confronted with something that seemed to bridge the gap between a machine and a living creature? If you have ever encountered an object that seemed to possess a will of its own, I would be fascinated to hear your story. Furthermore, the specific locations where the Ittan-momen appears offer another layer of mystery. As mentioned, the Osumi region is not only a hotbed for ancient spirits, but is now the site of Japan's primary space center. This connection between the ancient and the futuristic is startling. Places that are close to the gateway of space or areas where the Earth's crust exhibits peculiar magnetic properties often seem to be the preferred haunts of these white, fluttering entities. Is it possible that the Ittan-momen is utilizing localized gravitational anomalies or dimensional rifts to enter our reality? A two-dimensional, cloth-like shape would be the most energy-efficient form for a being or a craft, attempting to transition through a narrow wormhole or move between higher dimensions. From the perspective of a higher dimensional entity, our three-dimensional world might appear as flat as a sheet of paper. To move through our space, they might adopt a form that allows them to slide through the fabric of our reality like a needle through silk. In this sense, the Ittan-momen is not a monster from the past, but a visitor from a realm where geometry and physics function on a level we can barely imagine. They are observers who have mastered the art of existing on the periphery of our perception. As we dig deeper into the historical roots, some scholars suggest that the Ittan-momen was originally regarded as a messenger of the local deities, or kami. Its frequent sightings near sacred shrines or old battlefields suggest that it might be drawn to areas with high concentrations of residual psychic energy or spiritual significance. In Japanese culture, white cloth has always been a sacred medium. It is used in the kyokata-bira, the burial shroud that prepares the deceased for the journey to the next world, and in the shide, the zigzag paper streamers used in Shinto rituals to demarcate the boundary between the human and the divine. The Ittan-momen could be a manifestation of this spiritual energy, a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Its dual nature as a physical object that can be touched or cut, and as an ethereal entity that can vanish into thin air is exactly what elevates it beyond the status of a common monster. This leads us to a haunting question. Why have sightings of the Ittan-momen seemingly decreased in the modern era? Or have they simply evolved to match our current world? The sky today is a crowded, noisy place, filled with the constant drone of engines and the invisible hum of telecommunications. Perhaps the entity that was once known as the Ittan-momen has simply adapted its camouflage. What was once a roll of cotton might now appear as a stray piece of plastic caught in a high altitude. Thermal, or a peculiar, elongated cloud that moves against the wind. Even with our global network of satellites and radar, there are still countless reports of fast-moving white streaks that are dismissed as sensor glitches or optical illusions. They have not disappeared. They have simply integrated themselves into the background noise of a complex technological civilization. They are watching us from the blind spots of our own instruments. What do you believe is the true nature of the Ittan-momen? Is it a vengeful spirit from the ancient folklore of Kagoshima, a biological scout from a distant star system, or perhaps a piece of reconnaissance hardware from a future version of ourselves? Through our journey today, one thing has become undeniably clear: there is a presence in our skies that refuses to be categorized by our conventional logic. The entity we call the Ittan-momen has survived through the centuries, shifting its shape in our collective consciousness, but always retaining its core of mystery and terror. It challenges our understanding of the universe and reminds us that there are still horizons we have yet to cross. The next time you look up at a clear blue sky and see a stray fragment of a white cloud, take a moment to observe it closely. If it begins to move with a rhythmic, serpentine grace, you might just be looking at the very thing that the people of Osumi feared the most. We live in a world where we crave answers, yet we are constantly confronted by the inexplicable. The word yokai was a way for our ancestors to give a face and a name to the shadows, a way to structure the unknown so that it wouldn't overwhelm the human mind. But beneath the name, the reality of the Ittan-momen remains a profound enigma, a white ribbon of mystery stretching across the centuries into the vast, dark expanse of the cosmos. To uncover its secret is to understand something fundamental about the nature of our reality. If you should ever find yourself on a lonely road at night and see a pale shape dancing in the air, do not turn away. It may be the key to the greatest mystery humanity has ever faced. The Ittan-momen is a name that carries the weight of history and the chill of the unknown. Whether we view it as a ghost, a machine, or a visitor, its presence serves as a reminder that the world is far more mysterious than we often care to admit. The blend of physical aggression, spiritual symbolism, and technological strangeness makes this one of the most compelling subjects in the study of the supernatural. Did any part of today's discussion resonate with a story you've heard or a strange occurrence in your own life? If you have even the smallest piece of information or a personal encounter that seems to connect with these theories, please let us know. Your testimony could be the final piece of the puzzle that reveals the true identity of this sky-dwelling phantom. If you found this deep dive into the mysteries of the Ittan-momen thought-provoking, please consider subscribing to the channel to join our ongoing investigation into the world's most enduring enigmas. Your support allows us to continue peeling back the veil of the unknown. Also, hitting the like button helps share this mystery with others who may hold the answers we seek. Be careful when you walk through the shadows, and remember that the wind isn't always just the wind. I look forward to seeing you in the next exploration. Thank you very much for watching until the very end. A sea surface as still as a mirror, without a single ripple to disturb the haunting tranquility of the horizon, in the deep of night where even the silver light of the moon cannot reach the vastness of the ocean. The water suddenly begins to heave and swell, as if a mountain were rising from the abyss, and a colossal black shadow emerges from the depths. This is the entity that sailors since ancient times have feared. Above all others, the Umibozu. With its smooth, rounded head and a body of a darkness deeper than the night itself, we must ask, is this merely a fragment of folklore? Or is it a true sovereign of the deep that we have yet to comprehend? Even with the pinnacle of modern science, more than 95% of the ocean floor remains an unexplored frontier, shrouded in mystery, from strange footage captured by the latest deep sea probes to the consistent, chilling testimonies of veteran navigators. Today, we will peer into the darkness to uncover the true identity of the greatest enigma, lurking in the abyss, the Umibozu. For the vessels navigating the nocturnal sea, the most critical danger is not the sudden onset of a storm, or the hidden jagged edges of a reef. Rather, it is the moment when, without any warning, a gargantuan monk-like head rises from the otherwise calm and silent surface. The Umibozu, as its name suggests, is said to possess a texture as smooth and hairless as a Buddhist monk, its skin reflecting the starlight in a way that suggests something, both organic and unnervingly alien. Its eyes, the only features that break the monolithic blackness of its form, glow with an internal predatory light that seems to paralyze the very soul of anyone unfortunate enough to catch its gaze. The air around the ship grows heavy. The temperature drops as if the cold of the deep trench has been dragged up to the surface, and the rhythmic sound of the waves is replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. In the meticulously preserved scrolls and woodblock prints of the Edo period, the Umibozu is documented with terrifying precision, appearing as a creature ranging from a few meters to dozens of meters in height. These historical records describe an entity that does not merely exist, but interacts with the human world through a specific and terrifying ritual. According to these accounts, when the Umibozu rises beside a ship, it demands a hishaku, or a wooden ladle, from the trembling crew. To the uninitiated, this might seem like a bizarre request, perhaps the whim of a thirsty spirit, but to the seasoned mariner, it is a death sentence. if a sailor overwhelmed by the sheer scale and oppressive aura of the being hands over the ladle, the Umibozu begins to pour seawater into the hull with a repetitive mechanical speed. The sound of the water crashing into the wood becomes a funeral dirge as the vessel, despite the desperate efforts of the crew, is submerged and dragged into the lightless depths within minutes. This specific detail of the ladle is not merely a ghost story. It is a profound symbol of the primal terror that the sea instilled in the hearts of our ancestors. It represents a moment where the boundary between the human world and the incomprehensible wild of the ocean collapses, and a simple tool of civilization is turned into an instrument of destruction. Some scholars of folklore suggest that the ladle signifies a bridge between two worlds, and the act of giving it away is a surrender of one's agency to the mercy of the abyss. But why does the Umibozu seek such an item? Is it driven by an ancient, unquenchable thirst, or is the act of sinking the ship a ceremonial sacrifice, a way to pull the living into its silent, cold domain? Perhaps the creature is not seeking the ladle itself, but is testing the wit and resolve of the humans it encounters. I invite you to pause and consider this. What would you do in that moment of absolute shadow? Please share your thoughts and theories in the comments, as your perspective might shed light on a mystery that has baffled scholars for centuries. In the modern era, the Umibozu has not faded into the mists of superstition. Instead, it has found a new home within the cold, precise data of our most advanced maritime technology. While we may no longer speak of monsters in the same breath as our ancestors, our latest sonar systems frequently detect massive, anomalous, moving objects that defy conventional classification. These are not the predictable signatures of whales or schools of fish, nor do they possess the metallic, rhythmic echoes of submarines. On one notable occasion, a high-tech oceanic research vessel operating near the Philippines trench, a place where the Earth's crust plunges into the mantle, recorded an object exceeding 50 meters in length. What was truly disturbing was not just its size, but its behavior. The entity was moving at speeds exceeding 80 kilometers per hour, a feat that should be biologically impossible for a creature of such mass. From the perspective of fluid dynamics and marine biology, the energy required to propel a 50-meter body through the dense medium of the ocean at such velocity is staggering. The resulting turbulence should have been detectable for miles, yet the sonar indicated a smooth, almost ghostly passage through the water. The technicians on board watched in stunned silence as the blip on the screen glided through the lightless trenches, a titan of the deep that existed outside the known laws of zoology. Furthermore, deep-sea remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, have occasionally transmitted fleeting, grainy images that stop the hearts of those in the control room. In the peripheral vision of the cameras, just beyond the reach of the artificial lights, something immense moves. It is a flash of skin that looks like weathered stone, or perhaps a membrane so smooth it appears to be made of liquid darkness. These glimpses suggest that in the crushing pressures and absolute blackness of the deep, life has taken a path of evolution that we are only just beginning to suspect. One of the most scientifically grounded theories regarding the true nature of the Umibozu involves the misidentification of known, albeit rare, giant marine organisms. For centuries, the giant squid and the oarfish were considered nothing more than the fever dreams of exhausted sailors, until modern science finally proved their existence. The giant squid, with its massive, intelligent eyes, the largest in the animal kingdom, and its long, undulating tentacles, could easily be mistaken for a monstrous entity when seen partially at the surface. If the mantle of a large squid were to breach the water in the dead of night, its smooth, dark surface might very well resemble the bald head of a monk. The way it reflects the dim light, combined with the churning water that looks like a cloak of shadows, fits many of the historical descriptions of the Umibozu. However, if you speak to the veteran fishermen who have spent their entire lives on the shifting tides, they will tell you a different story. They argue that they know the difference between the scent of a squid and the presence of something truly ancient. They describe the Umibozu not as an animal driven by instinct, but as a singular conscious mass that possesses a palpable sense of will. While a school of fish or the back of a whale might create a visual illusion, it cannot account for the intense psychological pressure that accompanies a sighting, the sensation of being watched by something that understands you, even as you fail to understand it, is a recurring theme in these encounters. This suggests that we are dealing with something that transcends the simple, biological framework of predator and prey. Is it possible that the ocean, in its vastness, has birthed a form of consciousness that we are simply not equipped to recognize as life? In recent years, a new legend has emerged from the frozen reaches of the southern hemisphere, known as the Ningen. This creature, described as a massive humanoid entity reaching 30 meters in length, is said to inhabit the icy waters of the Antarctic. The similarities between the Ningen and the traditional Umibozu are nothing short of striking. Both are described as having smooth, pale, or dark skin, a lack of distinct facial features other than haunting eyes, and a terrifyingly human-like silhouette. While the Umibozu is often seen as a dark shadow in the temperate waters of Japan, the Ningen is described as being as white as the icebergs it hides among. This could imply a shared evolutionary origin, with each population adapting its coloration to its specific environment. A classic example of camouflaged evolution in the deep. Some researchers hypothesize that these beings are the remnants of an ancient, aquatic branch of the human family tree, or perhaps a separate lineage of intelligent life that retreated to the oceans millions of years ago. Living in the high-pressure, stable environment of the deep sea, they would have had no need for the rapid technological advancement of land dwellers, instead refining their biology to become the ultimate masters of the abyss. When they rise to the surface, are they observing us as we observe them? Are we merely a curiosity to them, a fleeting species that scuttles across the thin skin of their world? Or is their appearance a sign of something more ominous, a monitoring of the surface world that they once, perhaps, called home? The idea that we share this planet with a giant, silent, and intelligent neighbor is a thought that should make us look at the waves with a renewed sense of humility. Of course, we must also consider the role of physical and atmospheric phenomena in creating the specter of the Umibozu. The ocean is a place of incredible physical volatility, where forces of nature can manifest in ways that seem supernatural. Rogue waves, for instance, are massive, spontaneous walls of water that can rise twice as high as the surrounding swell. In the darkness, a rogue wave approaching a ship can look like a solid, rising wall of black flesh, a titan standing up from the depths to crush the intruder. Similarly, the phenomenon of Fata Morgana, a complex form of mirage, can cause distant objects such as small rocks or even other ships to appear vertically elongated and distorted. Under the right atmospheric conditions, a low-lying reef could be transformed by the bending of light into the towering, swaying figure of a giant monk. Yet those who have stood on the deck of a ship during such an encounter insist that these explanations fall short. They speak of a change in the very atmosphere, a thickening of the air that makes it difficult to breathe, and a silence so profound that it feels as though the world has stopped spinning. This psychological weight suggests that the Umibozu may be more than a physical entity or an optical illusion. It may be a manifestation of the collective unconscious of those who brave the sea. In the face of the infinite, uncaring ocean, the human mind may project its deepest fears into a form it can understand, creating a monster to give a face to the formless terror of the deep. But even if the creature begins in the mind, the physical evidence of sunken ships and anomalous sonar readings suggests that the shadow it casts is very real. Have you ever felt that inexplicable chill when looking out at the vastness of the sea, as if something were looking back at you from beneath the waves? When we examine the regional variations of the Umibozu legend across Japan, we see how the creature reflects the specific character of the local waters. In the Osumi region of Kyushu, the Umibozu is noted for its extreme aggression, actively seeking to capsize vessels and drag sailors into the surf. In contrast, the traditions of the Hokuriku region often portray the appearance of the Umibozu as a grim omen, a warning of an impending storm that allows wise captains to seek safety before the elements turn lethal. This duality, as both a predator and a harbinger, shows that the Umibozu is deeply woven into the cultural fabric of maritime life, serving as a personification of the sea's own dual nature as both a provider and a destroyer. Furthermore, the Buddhist connotations of the name Bozu add a layer of spiritual depth to the mystery. There is a persistent belief that the Umibozu is a manifestation of the Umi-Nyudo, or the spirits of those who have perished at sea without proper rites. In this view, the creature is not a biological entity, but a massive, shifting collective of the souls of the drowned, seeking to bring others into their fold. The smooth, hairless head is a reflection of the shaven heads of monks, perhaps representing a twisted form of penance or a final, silent prayer from the abyss. The sea is the world's largest graveyard, and it is not difficult to imagine that the weight of all that lost life could coalesce into something tangible, a dark monument of memory that rises to haunt the living. If the Umibozu is indeed a collection of lost souls, then the terror it inspires is not just fear of death, but fear of being forgotten in the cold, crushing dark. The search for the truth took an even more enigmatic turn with a recent discovery by a deep-sea submersible. At a depth of over 2,000 meters, cameras captured what appeared to be a massive stone structure partially buried in the silt of the ocean floor. To the observers, the shape was unmistakable. It bore the features of a colossal human face, staring upward through the miles of water toward the surface. The symmetry and detail were far too precise to be the result of natural geological processes. This has led to the radical hypothesis that the Umibozu may not be a living creature at all, but an ancient piece of technology, a sentinel, or a monitoring device left behind by a civilization that preceded our own, or perhaps one that originated from beyond our stars. If such a device were programmed to monitor the health of the oceans, it might rise to the surface to inspect vessels that it perceives as a threat or a significant presence. The eyes that sailors see could be sensors, and the ladle ritual could be a distorted memory of some ancient form of data exchange, or a warning to stay away from certain protected zones. This theory, while speculative, aligns with the way the Umibozu seems to appear specifically, when humans are most active or most intrusive in the marine environment. It suggests that the ocean is not just a body of water, but a managed system, and that we are being watched by guardians whose scale and purpose are beyond our current understanding. We are merely skimming the surface of a world that is far more complex and perhaps far more occupied than we have ever dared to imagine. The ocean remains the ultimate frontier, a realm as vast and mysterious as the cosmos itself. What we call the Umibozu might be a biological marvel, a psychological projection, a spiritual manifestation, or an ancient sentinel. It might even be a leak from another dimension, a shadow of a world where the laws of physics are written in a different language, manifesting in the unique, high-pressure environment of our deep trenches. To reach a definitive conclusion is impossible with our current level of knowledge, but the data continues to mount. Every year, more ships disappear without explanation, more sonar anomalies are recorded, and more sailors return to port, with eyes that have seen something they can never truly describe. The Umibozu appears most often when we are at our most arrogant, when we believe we have mastered the waves and tamed the wild. It rises to remind us of our fragility, a silent teacher from the dark that demands our respect and our awe. It is the embodiment of the unknown, the X in the equation of our existence that can never be solved. The next time you find yourself on a ship at night or standing on a lonely beach looking out at the black horizon, pay close attention to the water. If you see a shape that shouldn't be there, a darkness that is darker than the night, remember that you are a guest in a world that belongs to something else. Do not look away, for in that moment of recognition, you are witnessing the true, unvarnished face of the earth. Now, what do you make of the mystery of the Umibozu, the titan lurking in the deep? Is it a relic of a forgotten past, a biological anomaly, or something even more profound? To dismiss it as mere superstition is to ignore the wealth of evidence and the chilling consistency of those who have faced the shadow and survived. Science may one day provide an answer, but until then, the darkness of the ocean remains a sanctuary for the unexplained. And perhaps that is how it should be. There are some things in this world that are more beautiful and more powerful when they remain in the shadows. If you have ever had a strange encounter at sea or felt an unexplainable presence near the water, please share your experience in the comments section below. Your story could be the piece of the puzzle that finally reveals the truth. If you found this exploration of the deep sea's greatest mystery compelling, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. We will continue to dive into the abyss and uncover the secrets that the world has tried to hide. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in our next journey into the unknown.
You are lost, little one. Join us.
On a biting winter evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, and the sky bleeds from a bruised purple into a cold, unforgiving obsidian, have you ever felt a sudden, inexplicable shiver at your feet that seemed to defy the natural rhythm of the wind? Perhaps you were walking alone, the rhythmic crunch of frost-covered leaves under your boots, providing the only soundtrack to the encroaching shadows. You did not trip over a stray root, nor did you brush against the jagged edge of a rusted fence. There was simply a flash of movement in the corner of your eye, a momentary distortion of the air like a heat haze in reverse, and a single, razor-sharp gust of wind that whistled past you with the precision of a duelist's blade. In that moment, you might have felt nothing more than a localized drop in temperature, a fleeting sensation of cold that you dismissed as a mere trick of the season. But then, as the pale glow of a flickering street lamp catches your silhouette, you look down and feel a jolt of primal terror that freezes the very breath in your lungs. The heavy fabric of your trousers has been sliced open with surgical accuracy, a perfectly straight line that no accidental snag could ever produce. And beneath that severed cloth, carved into your very skin, lies a deep, crescent-shaped wound that stares back at you like a silent, accusing eye. The most unnerving part of this encounter is not the wound itself, but the eerie, unnatural silence of your own nervous system. There is no searing heat, no throbbing pulse, and no sharp cry of agony. It is as if your body has been edited by a silent filmmaker, the pain removed from the reel entirely. You touch the edges of the cut, expecting the warm, metallic stickiness of blood to coat your fingers, but your hand comes away dry. The wound is clean, deep enough to reveal the pale, shimmering layers of tissue beneath the dermis. Yet not a single drop of crimson spills forth to mar the winter snow. It is a biological impossibility, a defiance of every law of anatomy you have ever known. This, you realize with a creeping dread, is the unmistakable signature of a legend that has haunted the Japanese archipelago for centuries. This is the work of the Kamaitachi, the sickle weasel, a phantom that rides the whirlwind, an invisible predator that strikes without motive and vanishes without a trace. Tonight, we shall peel back the layers of this atmospheric enigma, traversing the narrow bridge between ancient folklore and modern physics, to understand the true nature of the wind's hidden blade. To understand the mechanics of a Kamaitachi attack, we must first reconstruct the moment of impact with the obsessive detail of a forensic investigator. Imagine the air not as a transparent void, but as a fluid, heavy and pressurized, swirling with unseen currents and dormant energies. When the phenomenon occurs, witnesses often describe a sudden, localized turbulence, a miniature cyclone that erupts out of nowhere. The victim is caught in a momentary vacuum, a pocket of space where the laws of friction seem to momentarily suspend. Like a master assassin who has refined his craft over 1,000 lifetimes, the entity, or the phenomenon, moves with a velocity that exceeds the human eye's ability to process. The air itself becomes a weapon, sharpened by centrifugal force into a blade of such extreme fineness that it bypasses the body's nociceptors, the pain receptors that should be screaming in protest. You do not feel the cut because the cut is too perfect. It is the ultimate paradox of trauma, a wound so clean that the brain refuses to acknowledge its existence until the evidence is presented visually. This sensory lag creates a profound psychological rupture, a feeling that you have been touched by something that exists outside the boundaries of the material world. Why does the wound remain bloodless? Why does the agony wait until much later to arrive? In the absence of scientific instruments, the people of ancient Japan turned to the world of the supernatural to find an explanation for this grotesque artistry. They did not see the wind as a mere movement of gas, but as a crowded highway for gods, demons, and spirits. The most enduring explanation comes from the snow-shrouded regions of Shinetsu, where the Kamaitachi is not viewed as a single creature, but as a coordinated triumvirate of divine or demonic brothers, each specializing in a specific stage of the assault. The first brother is the initiator, a force of pure kinetic energy that strikes the victim's legs, with the weight of a falling branch, causing them to lose their balance and stumble into the path of the unseen. As the victim falls, suspended in that weightless moment between standing and impact, the second brother strikes. He carries the sickle, a blade forged from the very essence of the cold north wind, and with a single practiced flick of his wrist, he carves a crescent into the exposed flesh. But the cycle is not yet complete. Before the victim's body even hits the ground, the third brother follows, clutching a jar of celestial salve. He applies this mystical ointment to the fresh wound with lightning speed. It is a substance of such potent power that it instantly cauterizes the blood vessels and numbs the nerves, ensuring that the victim remains unaware of their mutilation until the three brothers have long since vanished into the next gust of wind. This mythic tripartite structure is more than just a campfire story, designed to frighten the superstitious. It is a remarkably sophisticated metaphorical framework for a complex physical event. The people of the Edo period were keen observers of the natural world, and they recognized that the Kamaitachi phenomenon involved a sequence of distinct phases: impact, incision, and an unnatural physiological response. By personifying these phases as three brothers, they were able to categorize and communicate a phenomenon that would otherwise be dismissed as madness or hallucination. It represents an early attempt at a systemic analysis of trauma, an effort to find order in a world where the very air could turn against you. When you are faced with an invisible enemy that can bypass your armor and your skin without a sound, creating a narrative is the only way to retain your sanity. It transforms a random act of atmospheric violence into a ritualized encounter with the divine, providing a strange sort of comfort in the face of the inexplicable. As the sun of the Meiji Restoration rose over Japan, bringing with it the cold, analytical light of Western science, the gods and demons of the wind were forced into the shadows. The newly formed scientific community sought to replace the three brothers with the rigid laws of thermodynamics and fluid mechanics. For decades, the most dominant theory was the vacuum hypothesis. It was argued that within the heart of a powerful whirlwind or a dust devil, a pocket of extreme low pressure could form instantaneously. If a person were to be caught in this localized vacuum, the internal pressure of their own body, particularly the moisture in the skin and the gases in the blood, would attempt to equalize with the outside environment. This pressure differential would cause the skin to literally burst outward, creating a clean surgical tear that resembled a blade's cut. This theory was so widely accepted that it was printed in official science textbooks, taught to generations of students as the definitive triumph of reason over superstition. It offered a tidy, logical explanation for the bloodlessness and the lack of pain, suggesting that the pressure itself acted as a temporary tourniquet. However, as our understanding of physics deepened in the mid-20th century, the vacuum theory began to crumble under the weight of its own mathematical improbability. For a whirlwind to generate a vacuum, powerful enough to rupture human flesh through layers of winter clothing, the wind speeds would have to reach near supersonic levels. If such a vortex were to manifest in a residential street or a mountain pass, it would not merely scratch a passerby, it would level buildings, uproot ancient cedars, and shatter windows for miles around. The energy required for such a localized pressure drop is staggering, and it simply does not occur in the gentle yet treacherous gusts that characterize a Kamaitachi report. We find ourselves in a strange historical position where the scientific explanation that once debunked, the myth has itself been debunked, leaving a void where certainty used to be. Once again, the wind has slipped through our fingers, mocking our attempts to measure it with thermometers and barometers. We are left standing in the cold, realizing that the scientific reason we believed in for a century was just another kind of folklore, one dressed in the language of equations rather than demons. So, if it is not a vacuum and it is not a trio of gods, what does modern meteorology have to offer the victim of the sickle wind? The prevailing contemporary theory shifts the focus from the air itself to the debris it carries. During the dry, brittle months of winter, the atmosphere becomes a suspension of microscopic projectiles. In rural areas, these are sharp grains of silica and jagged fragments of dried vegetation. In the high mountains, they are needle-like crystals of ice, hardened by sub-zero temperatures until they possess the structural integrity of glass. When a specific set of geographical features, such as a narrow mountain pass or the artificial canyons created by high-rise, buildings converges with a sudden atmospheric front. These particles are accelerated to incredible velocities. They become a natural version of a sandblasting machine or a high-pressure water jet cutter. When this stream of abrasive material strikes the skin at a precise angle, it can shear through cellular walls with such speed that the edges of the wound are effectively polished, preventing the immediate raggedness we associate with a typical cut. The physiological mystery of the missing pain and blood is then explained through the lens of cryology. In the environments where Kamaitachi attacks occur, the air temperature is often low enough to cause significant peripheral vasoconstriction. The body, in its wisdom, pulls blood away from the surface of the skin to protect the core organs, leaving the extremities in a state of semi-numbness. The cold acts as a potent anesthetic, dulling the nerves before the invisible blade even strikes. When the cut occurs, there is no blood to spill because the vessels are already clamped shut by the freezing air. It is a perfect storm of environmental factors. The wind provides the kinetic energy, the grit provides the edge, and the cold provides the mask. Yet, even this robust explanation falls short when we encounter cases where the victim's heavy wool coat remains completely intact, while the skin beneath it is deeply lacerated. How can a physical particle, a grain of sand or a shard of ice, pass through the weave of a garment without leaving a single broken thread, yet manage to draw blood or the lack thereof from the flesh beneath? This is the point where the materialist explanation falters, and we are forced to wonder if there is a dimension to the wind that our current instruments are simply not tuned to detect. The lore of the Kamaitachi is far from a monolithic tradition. It is a living, breathing tapestry that changes its colors, depending on the soil from which it springs. In the Hida region, the entity is whispered to be a cruel mountain deity that demands respect through fear, often striking those who speak too loudly or show arrogance in the presence of the peaks. In Aichi Prefecture, the description takes on a more vivid, almost pyrotechnic quality. There, the phenomenon is known as inchi, and it is said to be a weasel-like beast that doesn't just cut, but leaves behind a faint, glowing trail of blue fire as it streaks through the midnight woods. These regional variations are not mere inconsistencies. They are localized adaptations of a universal human experience, the sudden, violent encounter with the unseen. If you look at a map of these reports, you will see they cluster around areas of extreme topographical complexity. Deep valleys where the wind is squeezed into a frenzy, or steep slopes where cold air tumbles down like an invisible waterfall. The folklore serves as a cultural mapping of dangerous microclimates, a way for ancestors to tell their children, "Be careful in the shadows of the valley, for the air there has teeth." Historical records provide a chilling testament to the persistence of this phenomenon. In the pages of the Koshi Yawa, a sprawling collection of essays and observations by the Edo period Lord Matsura, Seizan, we find numerous accounts of high-ranking samurai and humble merchants alike who were struck down by the malignant wind. One account describes a warrior walking through the streets of Edo on a clear, breezy day. Without warning, he felt a tug at his side, as if a playful child had pulled at his kimono. When he reached his destination and removed his outer layers, he found a gash across his ribs so deep that it reached the bone. Yet his silk undergarments were untouched. The shock of such an impossible injury often led to more than just physical scarring. The Koshi Yawa notes that victims frequently fell into a state of deep melancholy or suffered from wind fevers, a psychological collapse brought on by the realization that their physical safety was an illusion. In a society built on the rigid honor of the sword, the idea of being defeated by an invisible, mindless blade was perhaps the ultimate indignity. It shattered the warrior's sense of control over his environment, proving that even the sharpest katana was useless against the caprice of the atmosphere. In our modern era, we might think ourselves safe behind the double-paned glass of our climate-controlled offices and the reinforced steel of our urban infrastructure. But the Kamaitachi has not vanished, it has merely moved into the city. Modern architects and urban planners have inadvertently created the perfect habitat for this ancient monster. When wind hits the face of a skyscraper, it is forced downward and sideways, accelerating as it is squeezed between the narrow corridors of the concrete jungle. This is the Venturi effect, a principle of fluid dynamics that turns a brisk breeze into a localized gale. In these artificial canyons, pedestrians often report being knocked off their feet by invisible walls of air, or finding mysterious, clean-cut tears in their expensive designer jackets after a particularly windy commute. We see these stories pop up on social media and anonymous message boards, modern digital versions of the Koshi-yawa. A student in Tokyo, a salaryman in Osaka, a tourist in Nagoya, all sharing the same story of a sudden chill, a ripped sleeve, and a bloodless mark on the arm. The doctors at the local clinics shrug their shoulders and blame hidden sharp edges or industrial debris, but the victims know better. They felt the wind breathe on them. They saw the way the air shimmered just before the strike. The setting has changed from a mountain path to a subway entrance, but the predator remains the same. If you find yourself fascinated by these intersections of the macabre, the scientific, and the legendary, if you want to dive deeper into the mysteries that linger in the corners of our modern world, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and join our community of seekers. By subscribing, you ensure that you never miss a journey into the heart of the unknown, and you help us continue to shine a light on the shadows that history and science often leave behind. Your support is the wind beneath our wings as we navigate the treacherous currents of the unexplained. Before we conclude our exploration of the sickle wind, let us look to the wisdom of the past for a way to walk safely through the gale. Ancient tradition suggests that one can protect themselves from the Kamaitachi by carrying a slip of paper from a traditional calendar, or by reciting specific protective charms when the wind begins to howl with an unnatural pitch. To a modern mind, this sounds like pure superstition, but there is a profound psychological utility in these rituals. By performing a small intentional action, you transition from a passive victim to an active participant in your environment. You sharpen your awareness, you steady your gait, and you focus your mind. In a world of chaos and invisible blades, the greatest shield is not a physical one, but the armor of a prepared spirit. Nature is a vast, beautiful, and utterly indifferent force that can grant life with one breath and take it away with the next. The legend of the Kamaitachi is a reminder of our own fragility, a call to humility in the face of a universe that we have yet to fully map. The next time you step out into a cold winter evening and feel a sharp, sudden gust tug at your collar, do not merely pull your coat tighter. Listen to the whistle of the air, watch the way the shadows dance on the frost, and remember that you are never truly alone in the wind. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and above all, on those nights when the breeze feels a little too sharp, please be careful out there.